Good afternoon, everyone. Really nice to see such a full house. Thank you for coming to the session today. My name's Siobhan Gates. I am one of the committee members for Social Researchers of Colour, so I'm just going to give a little intro before I hand over to Fatima, who's going to be chairing the session today. So for those of you that don't know, Social Researchers of Colour is a professional network run by volunteers, myself and Anna and a couple of others who couldn't be here today. We basically just want to provide space for researchers of colour to come together for that kind of peer support. The network was born out of, in 2020 we ran a workshop just to create that space, and we realised how powerful and needed it was, so we decided to continue creating those spaces going forward. The network has really grown a lot in that time. We run events, most recently a speed networking event, bringing senior leaders together and researchers together to kind of provide those networking opportunities that researchers of colour often struggle to access. So that's just a flavour of the kind of stuff that we do. Today's session is really about kind of thinking about EDI and kind of where we've got to in the last 5 years, and focusing on looking forward about kind of how we can keep doing this work, the change that we could actually create to make our workplaces more inclusive, and hopefully inspire you with some ideas to take away to consider for your own organisations. Was there anything else I wanted to say? I don't think so. We've had slight kind of different formulation today than we had originally planned in terms of the panel, so that's not quite accurate, but Fatima's going to introduce everybody. So yeah, I'll hand over to you, Fatima.
Hi, thank you very much. Hi, I'm Fatima Hussain, so I'll just say a couple of sentences about myself. I've been working in within the social research sector for over 25 years. Come from a background in literature, and I was reflecting a little bit on what existed before EDI. And I remember post-structuralist theory, deconstructionism, all these isms that we used to work on that kind of morphed into what is now kind of corporate EDI. So it's really nice to be here and talk more about what we do as an organization. And what I want to do first is introduce all the panelists and then go through some kind of a discussion about some of the key issues and the key work they've been doing. And I think at the end we'll open up for questions if there's time. I think there should be some time. So first of all, I want to introduce Siobhan Gates, who I've known for many years. We used to work together at the National Centre for Social Research and the Children and Families team, and I was at one of the first events that the Social Researchers of Colour hosted at NatCen at that time. And Siobhan has been involved in EDI issues throughout her career, and also as a trustee at the Dartington Service Design Lab. I really wanted to get that right. And then we have Anna Heltman, who has worked previously at Kantar Public and then Varian, where she led work on EDI and is currently at the GLA. And then we have Ruben, who I know from before too, Ruben Balfour. He is an associate director at Ipsos Public and has previously worked at ICF International, so the commercial research sector, and he co-chairs a wonderfully named group network, REACH, which stands for Race, Ethnicity and Cultural Heritage Network at Ipsos. And then finally, last but not least, we have Arielle Garton, who's Director of Partnerships and Public Affairs at Dartington Service Design Lab. And she has worked previously at Save the Children, but is really involved as a senior leader at Dartington in kind of driving forward an anti-racist approach, which is part of Dartington's strategy, and kind of holding to account the organization to make sure that they do what they say they want to do. So welcome, and welcome to everyone in the audience. I wanted to start out first by talking to Siobhan and Anne about the new MRS report that's come out, and I would like to reflect on some of the key findings from their perspective of what they think is you know, what's changed, what hasn't changed, and why that report is important. Anna, would you like to start?
Should I just start with just why we wanted to talk about that report?
Okay.
Because, well, it just obviously seems a bit kind of, we're at the SRA conference talking about the MRS report, but it was just the timing of it and the kind of findings and the fact that one of the things that kind of led us to, that kind of moved our work along at Social Research of Colour was also the Social Research Association's report in 2022. So it kind of like is a nice kind of continuation of that thread for us, and just it's a really nice snapshot of where the research sector is at the moment. So, but Anna's got some findings to share with you all.
Yeah, I'm just going to very briefly go through some of the findings. And as Siobhan said, we don't really have that much data on the industry as a whole in terms of its workforce. So we find that it's very important to be able to sort of take what we can get. And this piece of research, the surveys themselves were conducted last October. So this is another important thing to keep in mind. This is already kind of 8 months off, and a lot has happened over the last 8 months. You know, presidential elections, culture changes, both, you know, globally, but also within the UK. So I think it's just something to bear in mind that within that context, a lot of changes will have happened already. Also, I guess just broadly, the economy and stuff will also influence how people are feeling generally about their work and about pay, about progression, all of that stuff. So as with all things EDI, we are part of a wider structure of things that are happening, and I think that's important to keep in mind rather than EDIs as its own little practice on here on the side. So the research stuff, it was a survey among over 700 respondents. That's quite a big figure among people working in the market research industry, obviously social research being part of that. They ran previously a very similar survey in 2022, so that gives it more value because you'll be able to sort of track some of the changes over time, and that's where some of the really interesting things are coming through. Whether surprising or not, there does seem to be quite a significant decline in positivity about people's workplaces and workplace culture. And this is a survey among all types of people, not just people who are interested in EDI, or not just people who are sort of ethnic minorities or people with disabilities, across the board. Obviously, they will over-index in the survey because they're the ones who are interested. But across the board, people are less positive about their workplace. So all the different statements that they ask, so feelings of unbelonging, feeling emotionally supported at work, that the fact that if they're given opportunities to learn and progress in their roles, recognition for good work as well, and also the feeling that senior managers are fair when it comes to hiring and promotions. All of those have gone down since 2022. And this is in the face of sort of I guess since some of the reckoning in 2020, so quite a lot of interest within EDI. Not much, if anything, has really improved when it comes to people on the ground, it feels like. So yeah, this is some very interesting findings and kind of chimes with what the conversations that I have been having with people around as well, just generally in the research industry. Secondly, ethnic minority workers specifically, so there was a bit of analysis done between white professionals in the research industry versus those of ethnic minority backgrounds, and they continue to be sort of feel less empowered about their role in research, so they are less likely to be able to feel like they can speak up for causes that they believe in. They're less likely to feel like the company actively supports them, and people of different diverse backgrounds, less comfortable being themselves, and also feeling that women and other diverse groups are well represented across the company at different levels. It's not super surprising, but it's just interesting to see that sort of written out in numbers. And also there's been quite an increase in the proportion of people reporting incidents of workplace discrimination. And this is only since 2022. So this is not a long time period, but even within that time, there seems to have been some sort of shift. And I feel like that kind of creates, that gives a bit of context about the world that we are sort of working in day to day in research. And finally, when it comes to actions about sort of broadly, what are people prepared to do to tackle some of these issues around DEI? And as you do in a survey, they were given a link of actions, and the very top thing that comes out, interestingly, is something called act as an ally or a supportive colleague. So it's about, I think, 70% said that they would be happy to do that, and this is the whole sample. Below that are other things like learning about DEI issues and privileges, thinking about your own privileges, promoting better use of DEI data, embedding better focus on like diverse groups and things like that, and recruitment practices. But these were all lesser priorities than it was to be an ally, which I would question, because what does it actually mean to be an ally then? So that's probably something that we'll go into in a bit more detail. But yeah, broadly, those are the sort of three key things. So bit of a downturn in how people feel about themselves in their workplace, lack of empowerment among ethnic minority audiences, and what does allyship mean, and how do people perceive themselves in the world of allyship. So that was broadly the findings from the MRS report, which I haven't seen it online yet, but hopefully will be out soon.
I think it's today,
It's meant to be out today, so maybe keep an eye out.
So one of the things that I guess I would like to ask all the panelists is, hearing these findings, do you feel they resonate at all for what you have seen and the work you're doing in the workplace? Like, is the pace of change as slow in a way as the report depicts? What has happened since 2020? Has there been a deprioritization? I don't know if you want to start, Siobhan.
Well, I don't know if I think my sense is that the kind of findings in this report, which is part of why I wanted to talk about them, is reflective, as Anna mentioned, reflective as kind of a general feeling that there was a lot of energy behind this work in 2020 and the kind of subsequent years, like kind of quite immediately. But this change takes a long time and is hard and isn't kind of linear and straightforward. So my sense is that people have kind of got despondent just because they're not seeing the change that they thought they would see. I also think that there's lots of different kind of layers to this, right? There's an accountability element to it, right? Senior leaders feeling like, staff care less about this now, so I don't need to kind of, focus on it as much because ultimately they weren't invested for the right reasons. They're invested because it's a,
Marketing exercise.
Marketing perceptions rather than actually believing in the work. And my sense is that my sense is there are fewer and fewer organisations still committed to this and doing it well, and just the fact that we actually struggled to get people to be on the panel today because we couldn't find leaders and people who are doing this work and able to kind of offer this kind of honest reflections about what's difficult but what works and what we can work towards in the future. That I think that speaks volumes that was such a challenge across the committee. It was 5 of us on the committee. We work in a range of different organisations, charity research agencies, academia, and across the 5 of us, our networks, it was really, really tricky, which is part of why me and Anna are now on the panel. That wasn't the original plan, right? So I think it's sad but not surprising at all. And I think, we were even talking earlier, weren't we, even about the kind of changes you've seen at Ipsos. So I wondered if you want to...
Yeah, so I have been co-chair. I've stepped down only recently, but I was co-chair for over 2.5 years at Ipsos and part of the Reach Network from its inception in 2019. And what I've witnessed over the last maybe 3 years is a really sort of general decline of momentum behind EDI issues that come from within the network. So there are a few people in this audience who left the organisation, but when they were part of it had lots of ideas, had things that they wanted to sort of champion and drive. They've left the network. They haven't really been replaced. And at a senior level, definitely there's less of an interest. I'm talking about ethnic minority professionals in the organisation really interested in the Reach Network and what it's doing. And then at the junior level, the more junior staff are sort of a little bit lost. They want to get involved, but then they don't really know what to do. They maybe don't carry the same, I suppose, bugbears about the industry or the organisation that maybe people who've been working in the sector for 10, maybe 20, 30 years do, and they don't really know where to sort of focus their energy. And so it does feel that we're in a sort of strange place at the moment where there's maybe a lack of direction, and that's coming from within. And then outside of that, there doesn't necessarily seem to be the same sort of support. It feels like it's more difficult to do the things that we want to do. Some of that is organisational bureaucracy, so there are more processes put in place. There are also at Ipsos, so I'm co-chair of the REACH network, but there are lots of other networks that focus on other, say, protected characteristics, and we are often feel like we're competing for the same space, along with all the other comms that go out in the organisation and all the other initiatives and things that people want to do. And so, yeah, the organisation itself and how it's run and the changes that have made things sort of more difficult, and it does feel like it's becoming less of an issue. And I don't quite know what's driving that. Yeah.
So I'll just put a question out there that is it bureaucracy or is it intentional impediments? And maybe ask Ariel a question of being on, as a senior leader, that it feels like you're actively driving change in that Dartington might be an anomaly within the space where it's feels like less of a priority.
I mean, for us, it remains a priority, but listening to everyone reflecting it, I mean, a few things spring to my mind. I think Dartington included, what spurred a lot of this action was a response to something external. And so we really have to examine ourselves that now some external pressure has gone, there's inaction in anything. If you look at the kind of global debates around EDI, there's kind of a push to go in the other direction. So I think that's something for us to think about. And I think the other thing is, and this is definitely reflects our experience, like doing the policy and the strategy stuff is kind of the easier bit. It's the actual work around developing culture in an organisation that's hard and complicated and takes work. And I think that is what I would interpret what that report says as some of that work not happening. And then I think speaking to my colleagues of colour and others and my own experience, there is, an old colleague taught me this phrase of trust comes in on a tortoise and out on a hare. And you have to think that people who have repeated bad experiences are losing trust in leaders and trust in organisation. So just as time goes on, if their trust in process and strategy and policy decreases, it's very hard and will take a very long time to win back that trust. And rightly so, in my opinion.
Thank you. Just to ask a couple of follow-ups around the report. So one of the things I know you said was that people are less likely to speak up and don't feel comfortable and so on. So is that because there is a lack of safe spaces within organizations? And how might networks like the one Ruben has co-chaired at Ipsos, or the work you're doing, Ariel, how might that support the creation of safe spaces?
Who's that question for? Anyone?
For anyone, really, but yeah.
Can I go? So I think this kind of speaks to just kind of actually what Ariel alluded to, that there's a bigger kind of cultural shift needed. This kind of idea that networks and working groups and all of this stuff is like a vital part of kind of getting stuff off the ground and getting stuff moving and prioritising it. But ultimately, things are not sustained if there is not a cultural shift in your organisation. So this is my interpretation is this will be part of why some of the stuff that Ruben mentioned has become an issue, that certain people have left and then the work has stalled or become kind of less kind of energised. I experienced the same thing when I worked in NatSen, that we had a senior leader who was really behind the work, really supported the kind of more junior staff to drive it forward when she left, and then another couple of people, and I also left. That Fatima still works there. She's like the EDI group now doesn't do as much as it used to because the key people who were driving it before left. So it cannot be the responsibility of a handful of people to keep driving it forward, because when they leave, when they get fed up of saying the same things over and over again, you know, trying to convince, you know, the chief exec and, you know, whoever else to get behind this work and make, you know, meaningful change in the workplace, then they leave and then it stops or it stalls or, you know, or even goes backwards. So I think there's this, it's not easy work to do, but I think it is possible to do if you really want to create, it's a key part of the inclusion piece, right? Inclusivity is like, you know, a sense of belonging, you know, feeling comfortable at work. If you're not doing that, which is a cultural piece, like this is always going to kind of come around as an issue, and that's the bit that's the hardest bit to do. It feels less tangible. It's not a you know, a checkbox thing that you can do, but that's the bit that's needed to really actually create sustainable change. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a...
No, that's fine. Did you want to add anything to that, Ruben?
I was going to say, I think that timing is important.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often I would like to say that I provided a safe space or did my best to provide a safe space for people to come forward in the organisation around particular issues. But again, it was quite often an external factor that then triggered people to come forward. And what we tried to do was respond in a human way and as quickly as possible. But quite often the business gets in the way of that and can often drag things out or lots of conversations have to happen in order to respond, which can be difficult. And I think that damages the trust a little bit that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then also just the new way that we're working from home a lot more, having worked 5 days a week in the office for most of my career. I've been working in the sector for about 14 years. Yeah, you don't feel as connected to the general people in your team as you may have done before. And I think that sometimes if you only ever speak to your line manager or the directors in your team or the most senior sort of business leads, or you might not even speak to them at all, but if you only speak to them sort of as a floating head on the screen or via email, you can't necessarily build up the same rapport and trust with people in order to get a bit of an earlier sense of some of the things that maybe came out in the report and the way people are feeling.
I was just going to add, I think also it's to recognise, well, one, it is not the responsibility of your colleagues of colour to only notice these things, but right now their burden is firmly falling on them. And even if there is a safe space, it is work to do that, and you risk losing things by doing that. That's what, you know, I've really heard from colleagues. And then you might also have to deal with a terrible apology, and that is exhausting. So I think there's, you know, and being just able and willing to go through all of that, and often having to support the person who's in the wrong to do that for you, it's just sometimes too much for people. And so I think even with, you know, it's always the same, even with good intention, it is hard to do that work.
So I want to combine two thoughts here. One is around the cultural shift, because that seems really, really important. And alongside that, this notion of being an ally, which Anna brought up, and which I've had discussed with Siobhan, where she'd said we don't need allies. You know, I'd rather have an accomplice. And I think that's kind of is a reflection around culture and values within an organization. So I just want to kind of put it out there to all of you to comment on is, what is it that you've done in your organizations or you would like to see done to create those safe spaces, to have that cultural shift and have real accomplices, because I love the word accomplice, you know, I want accomplices too, rather than allies. And what does it mean? You know, the question, what does it mean to be an ally? Do you just want somebody going, yeah, go for it, do all the hard work? You know, what is it that we as a group need?
If I can just say a bit more about that ally versus accomplice, I can't own that. I heard it on a podcast, but it was.
I love it.
But yeah, I love it too, which was why I bring it up regularly, because I was like, that's exactly it. The distinction is not somebody who's just going to stand behind you and kind of, you know, give you a round of applause and encouragement and pat you on the back. It's somebody who's like going to take the risk with you. Like, it's very, as Ariel was alluding to, you know, mentioning, it's really, you know, risky to kind of bring things up. It's a burden to kind of be the one always pushing this work forward. So like, you really need someone who's going to do that with you. And, you know, sometimes, you know, some of the risks that we hear about in our kind of monthly meetings are about things like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat too much because of my career and da 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 da. So why is it only people of colour that are worrying about that? You know, it should be a burden, that kind of, and really talking about this shouldn't risk anyone's careers, right? That is also terrible that that's what people are concerned about. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh.
About culture shift, maybe something you've seen.
Oh,
or
I just think this kind of, also the notion of like safe spaces is like, that is, like, it's a nice idea, but it's ultimately also quite problematic. Like, what is so unsafe about your workplace is that some colleagues feel like they need to create their own kind of safe space so that they're protected. Like, I'd really kind of encourage people to reflect on that, about what people might feel is unsafe about where they work, especially if you're, you know, in the majority and you're like, oh, but where I work is really nice. And, you know, people say that it doesn't feel inclusive, but I don't understand why. So, like, then reflect on that and think about that and, do, you know, learn and do the work to kind of, just think about that a bit more deeply, because if that people are still feeling like that now, after all of the stuff, all of the learning, all of the knowledge that was shared, all of the books that were written after 2020, it's like, you know, come on, like, it's really, at this point, it's just kind of inexcusable, in my view. Sorry, that's not a very good segue.
So, I mean, on this point of what you know, how to be an accomplice, what I understand from my colleagues, what they want more of, and where I think, despite, I mean, Dartington has done good things, and I share some of those. We need to get better, and I think it particularly falls on senior leaders and line managers calling out where you see racism, and it is that simple. And I think, as I said before, there's a few steps to that. There's one, people have to see it. Like, there is, at the moment, I would say people accept things and don't notice things. So you've got to get skilled and learn how to notice where it is showing up and how it is showing up. And yes, there is very overt racism in the sector. There's also like this hideous, subtle racism and microaggressions that permeate so much of work. So I think it's about noticing, and then it's getting skilled at calling it out and realising if you're not doing it and you don't feel confident, then it's sort of incumbent on you to do that work. And, you know, there's lots written about it. They're great organisations, and for us at Dartington, we notice that's where we've got to get better, right? So I know that's something that would make a difference for our colleagues of colour, and so we notice it's something we need to invest in and get more support as like a leadership team to do more of. Yeah.
I was thinking about the term ally, and your point that the people put 70% as, yeah, I want to be an ally, but then the actual doing came below. I think that's an accountability point, really. And so accountability needs to start at the top. So maybe you can talk a good talk, but maybe putting in, I don't know, don't want to say sort of targets, but something that reflects that you're accountable for how people feel, the culture of the organisation, the diversity of your organisation, and then how that feeds down in the different levels to senior leadership, to line management. I mean, at Ipsos, across our networks, we try to have a representative from the board, the senior management team, on each of the networks. The Reach Networks board sponsor went on mat leave 3 months ago, and we haven't replaced them, much to my frustration. I don't quite understand why, and we would have known that she was going on mat leave maybe 3 or 6 months in advance of that, so you could say there's been a 9-month period and we haven't replaced them, and I don't know why that is. But that's the kind of accountability and support and investment from senior management that we'd expect that we haven't got.
Yeah, I had a senior leader in an organization once say to me, "This is a safe space, you can say what you like." And I thought, it's not for you to decide what's a safe space. So again, it's about creating that culture, and it's not about individuals. And I think the allyship, people assume sometimes that if you champion one person that you're being a good ally, but it's kind of collective struggle, or should be a collective struggle. I just wanted, sorry Anna, did you want to add to
Just,
that?
I guess basically what you were saying about sort of, I really don't like the term ally either. I think it divides people into individual people and also into groups. So you're either an ally or the person who is oppressed, and they're kind of like sitting on different sort of benches, and it's great if the ally wants to help. It's like, oh, thank you very much, you know, you're being so supportive. But I think I really want to reconfigure how we think about our workplaces as places of solidarity. I think we should, obviously the Accomplice is part of that, we should all be thinking of our workplaces, we are in this together. I know we have all different struggles, we are struggling with different levels of oppression, different types, structures of oppression, but we are workers in an industry and we all need to have each other's backs. And the worse the things get in the economy and things like that, the more important it is going to be for each of us to stand up for each other, whether that's a person of color, a person with disabilities. I think it's the division is not helpful and the individualization is not helpful. We are all a part of a bigger group. And I know that that's sort of not really drummed into us anymore, and like capitalism makes us all into individuals. We're always competing. We're always trying to get one up on the other. It's always a zero-sum game. If you get something, then I don't get something. We have to rethink how we think about this. This is broader in life as well, not just in like your workplace. But I think we need to get together into our communities and really stand up for each other. I think that's the only way that we're going to get the power that we need to make real changes. Just, you know, easy peasy.
No, I really agree with that. I think like we can sometimes get tied in knots about kind of, and I think it comes from a place of good intention, of like caring about like, oh, you know, we need to be mindful of like, you know, this specific group has a different experience and this, and it's like you're starting in the wrong place. If you're not starting from a place that's actually like treating each other as people, actually caring about kind of how other people experience work and you know, how they feel at work. Like, if you're not starting with that as your baseline, it doesn't matter how many initiatives you have for, like, you know, black staff to have mentoring or whatever, like, that fundamental value isn't there, it's not gonna, you know, this sustainable change isn't gonna happen.
We have so much more in common than we have not in common. I know that there's individual struggles, but we are all, a lot of us at least, are working either as employees or freelancers. We are, you know, at the sort of mercy a lot of times of senior leadership and the careers and needing to make, you know, connections, all of that stuff. And as soon as we understand that we're all trying to sort of survive within that same environment and come together, I think we're going to make more strides rather than dividing us into allies versus not allies. And, you know.
If I can ask kind of, because I want to open it up to questions from yourselves, is one question for the panelists, is thinking about the work you've been doing. If you could, if we start with Ariel, thinking about one thing that's been implemented at Dartington, for example, that's worked really well, that you would recommend, you know, or suggest as a success, and one gap that you think where a lot more work needs to be done in the context of talking about cultural change, solidarity, you know, accountability, leadership, kind of championing it, so on.
So I think the thing that Dartington has done well is thought about how you do this work and recognising what's required. So, and it took us a long time to get there, like, and we made mistakes and got it wrong and perpetuated harm in the process. So it took us time, and we're a very small organisation, so have the ability to be agile and change and do that, which is a good thing. But and it reflects a bit what Ruben was saying, you know, we've set up a very small anti-racist coordination group. It is chaired, and that position as chair is remunerated, and so inherently you recognise that the person is doing quite a lot of work and that is beyond scope of their role. It has our CEO and our Director of Operations sit on that committee, and they steer our anti-racist work, which has really meant that we centre those who experience harm are at the core of that work, and it is focused on action rather than reflection, because I think that was a challenge that we faced previously, leaning way more into a reflective space and also centering whiteness in doing that. And I think, and linked to that, that there's something that I think I've read and learned that like doing this work is countercultural, so then how you do it is important. So when we dedicate every 6 weeks time for a whole organisation to work on anti-racism, and we take a totally different approach than we do for any other meeting. We use that open meeting approach, so anyone can raise a subject matter. People vote with their feet about who they want to go and discuss that, and it's very equitable in that sense. People can talk about work, their experience, and engage in that. So I think how we do the work is something that we're doing well in this space. What we aren't doing well, there's lots. I've talked a bit about like getting better at calling things out. I think there's a lot for us to do around inclusion at Dartington, and like reflecting on what Siobhan was saying about like starting from a point of people. Like I think a lot of that is. Again, particularly incumbent on line managers and senior leaders, is can you have good conversations about identity with people? Like, can you engage, have a normal, not weird conversation? And if you are managing or working with colleagues of colour, if you haven't done that, then you are not. That person is having a very odd experience at the workplace, because I can guarantee in the rest of their life they are talking about that all the time. So I think just knowing yourself, and if you can't do it, like learn. And practice on someone else, not your colleagues.
But you, Ruben, with Ipsos.
Yeah, I'm probably going to bang on about accountability again. So the death of George Floyd sparked change across the world, but change at Ipsos, and the sort of spotlight was very much focused on the Reach network for about a 6-month period of time. It felt quite intense. But one of the things that we did do was we made a number of requests to the senior management team to implement a range of things. And one of the things that we did was to start monitoring the ethnicity pay gap. We're required to do it for the gender pay gap, and so they said yes to all of them, which was great. We really wrote the tales of the momentum that we had at that point in time. And so we now, since I think 2021, have published our ethnicity pay gap. It's good, because you can't know what the gap is unless you monitor it. And so I think that's good, and it's a very useful tool to look at lots of the other elements of the culture. So for example, I should say, we follow the exact same methodology for the gender balance and the gender pay gap. You can use it to identify a range of issues. So we have an ethnicity pay gap. We need to understand why. We need to communicate that. That doesn't always go as planned. And the Reach network, we've really used this to drive a lot of things across the organisation. You can use it to examine, okay, what about our culture means that people get to a certain level, particularly people from an ethnic minority background, and then leave the organisation. So again, it enables you to maybe use some data, use a sort of rationale to focus on things around what's our inclusive culture like, where are there issues. We've done great work at the junior level. We've changed our recruitment processes. We've changed how we, so not everybody is university educated now. We now have apprenticeships across, I think, all our service lines, which is great. And it seems to be attracting a different type of person, which is what we set out to do. But the gender pay gap still exists. There's a lot to do there. It's mainly focusing at the senior level, which is a more difficult element to address, and I don't think we have the answers for that just yet.
I'm keen to hear from the audience. As
Okay.
I
Shall
realise
we?
we've
I
not
don't
got
know
loads
what
of time
time,
left.
yeah. So over to you if you have any questions for the panel. No question. Oh, over here. Lady in blue. Yes. Oh, there's a mic. There's a mic.
Didn't see you. Thank you. That was really interesting. I actually have. I was going to say I have 2 questions, but one of them has just fled my brain in panic. One of the questions I had though was around the MRS survey. Have you seen similar surveys, and is this reflective across the workforce, or is this something that's particular to market or social research?
I've seen it.
I don't think I've seen anything.
I've not seen any other sort of specific other industry surveys on this matter before, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't reflective of the broader sort of feelings of employees of colour in general.
I remembered the second question, actually. It was leading on from what Ruben said, which I thought was really interesting. It's really great to hear that you've got apprenticeships, and I was interested to hear how you've changed the recruitment practices as well. But one of the things I was also wondering is how much it's related to people coming up through and what route they're coming up through, like how many people are entering university, and what kind of diversity there is there, and how much it is about the recruitment practices that people have. Thank you.
Okay. So I think that there is generally a type of person that enters market or social research, and generally the pool is probably less diverse than maybe the country or other.
I feel like this was something that was in
Yeah.
the SRA report that I can't quite remember what exactly, but it was it's pretty kind of homogenous in terms of kind of what we would expect really. I think
that kind of.
I don't know if I've misremembered that. Is that I'm seeing nods from yeah. So. But what I would say is that like this diversity thing is only like part of the puzzle, and it's where people get stuck, right? Oh, let's change recruitment practices. It's really great that a broader kind of range of type of person can get into social research now at the junior level. But then what? Then to go into a workplace that treats them less than cool. That's really great thing to be doing. So it's just this kind of like it's got to really be. A bit more holistic than just kind of yes, changing recruitment practices is part of the puzzle because of I don't think that the kind of current things like Be Applied have solved that, although lots of places use them now. They're basically just testing whether or not you can write a good answer to a question, which if you've and whether or not you've learned how to write, which is so that's it's so there's that piece of like are the tools that are supposedly better actually better. Improving diversity at the junior level is only part of the puzzle. It's about kind of, and this is something we've talked about a lot in social researchers of colour, about it's the retention and progression piece as well. Like once you've got people in, like actually kind of supporting them, training them, making sure they've got access to opportunities. It's this piece about what skills you recognise and this kind of myth of meritocracy and actually like reflecting on that, and it's not just about kind of having a degree, and it's also like what kind of skills you value once people are in the workplace, what skills you're valuing in the staff you've got, and all of that is kind of you could get all of that right, but then ultimately if you've not got an inclusive workplace it's all kind of falls apart. So you can't just do one of these things, it's got to be all of it. Yeah.
Shall we take 1-2 more questions, if there are any? At the back.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much for that. That was really, really great. I was wondering a bit of advice then, I guess, for like junior social researchers, like when we are like the lowest in a big organisation and when the champions of these things are really senior, kind of what's a bit of advice that we can do at this level to have that impact when we do feel quite small in such big organisations?
I think it's peer support is what, that's what I kind of would have valued as a more junior member of staff, I think.
I think, asking yourself, do you have a good understanding of your peers' experience? Like your colleagues of colour, do you understand the experience they have in the workplace? Like, could you advocate and champion on their behalf? Like, are you confident enough in understanding that experience? I think if you're not, that's probably a good starting place. Like a kind of like a basic, and then it's really. I mean, I'm at a tiny organisation now, but I've been at a big organisation. It's hard in the big organisations to challenge things. There's the hierarchy is there to prevent that. So, but learning how to do it yourself. And so the burden doesn't just fall on the people who are experiencing harm to do it, I think is another thing I'd say.
Yeah, can I just add, I think being prepared that they're going to say no, because quite often in working with a lot more junior staff, I warn them that, somebody says no, that doesn't mean that it's the end of the thing or that you have to necessarily give up, but it's a business. This is what happens sometimes. We get told no, you have to find another way to do it. It doesn't mean that you just give up on everything completely. But yeah, be prepared that you might not necessarily get the answer, or you have to take what little progress you have made and build on that, even if you don't get all of what you wanted. It's a negotiation.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the SRA. This is my first SRA conference, and I've been in social research for, as I said, over 25 years. So that's nice to be here at the invitation of the Social Researchers of Colour. And do come up and ask questions if you have any. And I just want to leave you with one thought. I had a really lovely Audre Lorde quote, but I'll leave it for now, is that, and talk about something else. About 2 decades ago, or maybe more, there was a report out called Snowy Peaks. So this is the retention progression piece of organizations in general, where all organizations have snowy peaks. The leadership, the senior trustees and so on are all white, and then you have your mountain, but the snowy peaks remain snowy. And I think that's one of the things around accountability, retention, progression, and so on. That really, that's part of the culture change that doesn't ever seem to happen. Thank you very much.